Good morning,
Good morning.
one and all, to all those of you out there in the, who watch on YouTube after the fact. We are in the midst of a Siman Reish Nun Gimel. We were here. You can take one, Michael.
No, I don't understand it yet. Okay.
Here, I'll do something helpful also. Okay, so we were going through the first opinion. I read two opinions that the Shulchan Aruch is going to cite as to how you can, how you heat your food up Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. So we are still in opinion number one, which reflects the opinion of the Rambam and the Rif. And so I'm just going to quickly reread the Shulchan Aruch text. We're not going to reread the Mishnah Berurah text that we did, but just so we have a sort of a running head start into what we're, to where we are, because we're really on page 40. So I'm just going to back up one page for a moment, and then I'll pick up right where we left off in a moment. But let's just read it so we're again all remembering all the details here. So Kira Shehiyasuyach Chidera Chikdera Veshoftim Alpia Kedera Lamala V'yesh Makom Shefisas Shtei Kederos. So if you have a kira which is made, which has a shape of at the top of it like pots. Again, Steve Keller, thank you to Steve for having sent out the pictures of what a kira looked like, and it has a place on top of it, like to place to place a pot. You could put things inside the oven too, but you could place things on top. You put it on the lip, on the rim.
Something like a grill or something like that on top.
No, it's an oven, and imagine it's just an oven where the heat rises. You can put things also on top so that it's not going to be quite as hot. There you go. There's a picture right there. Right. So it's not going to be quite as hot on the top, but it'll definitely warm food up for sure. And im huska begefes. All right, and there are places for two pots here. Im huska begefes sheep shel zeisim over eitzim. If you're going to reheat the food, if the fuel, excuse me, of the kira at the bottom of the kira, and again you can see it nicely in the picture there. There's a little hole where they put the fuel for the fire. If the fuel is gefes, which is the scraps of olives, I think it's called, the official terminology according to Jastrow was peat, P-E-A-T, of olives, of olive, scraps. I guess they're not whole olives. This is scraps from olives, or the eitzim, which is wood, which you're probably more familiar with in terms of using as a heat source. So asr litain aleha, you're not allowed to put on top of the kira tavshili ba'odyom, a dish, Friday afternoon, lehashhoso aleha, to just sort of wait there, to continue to be heated and cooked. Ela imkein nisbashel kol tzorko, unless it is fully cooked. V'humit samek, and it dries up. Right, think of the word raisins, simukim. Right, it dries up, it shrinks. Maybe the best way to put it, it shrinks. Perish holech v'chaser, as you sort of continue to cook, it decreases. Think of a soup. Soup will you'll lose. If you look where your pot, the level of the soup is, and you keep leaving it on the fire, slowly it will go down. Once I let me just finish the sentence here. Viralo, and it is not good for it. Sometimes, like a soup, it gets more concentrated, and actually the flavor probably is enhanced by the continuation of the cooking, even though it is fully cooked soup and you could serve it, people would enjoy it. But if you continue to do it, it will only actually concentrate it more. Because if it's not good for it, so if it's actually the decreasing of it, it's going to burn, it's going to, it's not going to be good, right? Then we're not worried that you're going to stoke the coals, right? That you're going to take a stick under the bottom of the oven over there, and you see that the embers are, it looks like it's kind of like slowly looks like it's going out. So what do? You start stoking them to reignite the flame. So then that's going to be allowed, but it has to be fully cooked. And even once it's fully cooked, the continuation of cooking it is not necessarily good for it. That's when, according to the first opinion of the Rif and the Rambam, there is not a problem of placing it on top of the kira, again, without even any kind of grufo ketuma situation where you're raking the coals either out or to the side. We'll talk more about that issue today. Or ketuma, which means you spread ashes over the coals, which will won't put it out fully, but will dim the heat and sort of it's sending it in the direction of lowering the temperature, for lack of a better way of putting it. You could have a case if there is raw meat in this dish that is placed on top of the kira Friday afternoon, 5 minutes before Shabbos. So it's not even cooked; it's fully raw. Shalonis bashal klal, it's not cooked at all. Since it is chai, masiach dato meno ad lamachar, then we say, okay, there's no hope for this to be ready on Friday night. Even if I stoke the coals and I'm essentially, I'm doing all that I can to hasten the cooking process, it's not going to be ready Friday night. It will not be ready for me to consume on Friday night, and therefore masiach dato meno, it's gone from my mind. This is for Shabbos lunch, and if it's for Shabbos lunch, I'm not going to play with it right now. Chazal, we're not worried. You're not going to play with something that's not going to be ready until tomorrow, anyways. And it's going to cook all night, and you're not going to stoke the coals because you'll worry about tomorrow. And reality is that once you get to tomorrow, let's say something is probably raw meat that's probably cooked all night. Once you wake up in the morning, more often than not, I'm not saying it's an impossibility. More often than not, it is cooked to the point where it's fully cooked. Right? If you've left meat over a strong heat source, again, think about a cholent. You turn it on, even on the low setting, right? 5 minutes before Shabbos. By Shabbos morning, the meat is ready to be eaten. So you again, they were not concerned about a case of shahiyah, of leaving it over the fire throughout the beginning of Shabbos into Shabbos when it's raw. Now here's where we left off. But if it's a little cooked, but not fully cooked, or maybe it is cooked, fully cooked, but it's stomach v'yafelo. Think soup, right? The continuation of this cooking is only going to do good things. It's going to be good. It's yafela. It's beautiful for it. It'll taste better. We are concerned that a person will stoke the coals. And let's make one point, by the way, about this whole stoking the coals here. Let's look at Mishnah Berurah Yud Beis, and then just make a little quick point. He writes here, Shema Yechata, Lamahir Bishul, in order to hasten the cooking. Right? The idea is here, I want to eat it at night. So, I stoke the coals at night in order, I hasten the cooking process by stoking them at night. Or actually, look, the increased heat, it's good for it, right? So if I see the fire is, it's slowing down, I want to really kind of, get the flame going again. So what do? I get that, I get it in there and I start stoking. I put my what's the tool in your? I don't know if I have a fireplace, but I don't know how to use it. That's the thing. If you have it's like a tool. It's a special poker. Okay, whatever it is. So you stick it in there and you increase the heat. So then we're worried. So now what is this like stoking? It's Shabbos. Like, what are you doing? Like, we're so concerned about someone who's going to do Hilchot Shabbat, right? Like, we have other rules on Shabbos that you're not allowed to do this, not allowed to do that. So, yes, this is a doraisa. If you actually did stoke the coals, that is havara, that is creating a fire, right? Because you are making the fire is, this high, and now it's this, and it's undoubtedly you are creating fire. So the question is, what were they concerned about? And so I remember where I saw this yesterday.
Maybe they were concerned with the fact that.
What do you say, Michael?
Maybe they were concerned that the fact that the fire was going and the fact that they would stoke it the way you say, it would go beyond the rules of, different way of saying it, the rules of whatever go to cooking.
Mm-hmm.
If you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes, I think here, this is not so much about the cooking as much as it is that it is normal for them.
Fire.
Right. No, so for sure it's not allowed.
So why are you even questioning what the issue is?
No. Why were they saying I can't do this? Because I might stoke the coals. Because I might stoke. Let's say that's fully cooked food here, right? Let's say, or I'm not even cooking it. Remember, as long as I put it on before Shabbos, I can't violate a prohibition on Shabbos, right? So why am I concerned? Why can't I just do this? Why they say rabbis saying I can't reheat the food because I might stoke the coals. Such a fear we have that we're going to stoke the coals and we're going to just leave me alone, and I'm not going to touch the fire, rabbis, let me just reheat the food. So I think the fear here and this is maybe it feels like not our situation, but this was when they cooked on a regular Tuesday like today, right? This was something that they were doing all the time, right? We set our oven and it's perfectly set. It's like it's 350. Right? I don't have to check it again. Like the thing beeps and says, I'm 350 now, right? You don't have to readjust it. Maybe if you're talking about the stovetop, you got to, adjust it, you're playing with the fire, if let's say you're making, sometimes when I make eggs, right? I don't want to burn the eggs, so I have to adjust it, and you have to, so you play with the fire, but for them, that was what they were doing all the time. And then when they had an oven, they just always had to be, playing with the coals in order to get the fire to be the heat to be at the, with the level that was appropriate for whatever they were cooking. So I think there was a great fear that this was just so ingrained in their behavior that when you sort of walked by the oven, right, you could easily forget and play with it. And that's where the fear comes from here. Because they were so used to stoking the coals in their regular cooking processes that they had the other 6 days of the week.
So that these shouldn't apply to us.
No. I'm making the case why they shouldn't, but they do.
Why?
Because
there's as you say, there's no question. We set the temperature and walk away.
Right. So and this is why today the way that we get around it, the way the modern understanding of Gerufo Ktuma, which is a way of sort of temperature control or of controlling myself so I don't make that mistake, is that we'll sort of cover a dial. Like if you're using, for those who have a blech on top of the stovetop. So the way that the from companies make these blechs today is, anybody see this? I don't know if everybody has this now. I don't have it in my own, but they make the blech on top of the stovetop, and then there's a part that comes down like this, which sort of ends up covering over the dials to adjust your flame on your stovetop. Or if you're using, like I went on Shabbos when I warm up my food, I have a tray, basically, it's a warming tray, and the dial is on the back. So I just put a piece of tape, over the top of the dial. Nothing crazy fancy. That took me literally 5 to 7 seconds to do, and it's just a way that we assure ourselves that we don't adjust it. So look, we do have, especially with a stovetop, if you're using a stovetop, right there, it is easier. The dial is just sort of available. It's, again.
So let me ask,
my wildest dreams, but
do you do the same thing for all the electrical switches in the house?
No.
I didn't hear what he said.
Steve asked, do we do the same thing for all the electrical switches in our house? Some people do, by the way.
Yeah, you use that much more commonly than the stove.
Right. You're absolutely right. This is why that's why some people put those things up. I don't do this, but some people put those things up on the over top of the light to help remind you, don't flip on the light today. It's Shabbos.
Right, but we know not to. I mean, so to me, it's really no different.
Right. We've ingrained our.
Right.
This is a classic situation of you have a Derabanan. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because sometimes this was brought up in a certain context, and once the law is established and fixed, it's established and fixed. And again, the easiest case to imagine here is the stovetop, right, where the dial is right there. It's at avail. And Steve makes an excellent point with the electric, with the outlets, right? We don't say that you have to cover your electric outlets or your switches. Some do. You're absolutely right. Some do, but this is an Xera Derabanan. The rabbis didn't make Xera, with regards to turning on the light bulbs. But
Okay. Yeah.
but there are, by the way, you're going to see it. There will be there'll be certainly Derabanans around how you use a flame or use a fire, which would have been their light source. They did have decrees. Can you read by a light on, right next to the light on Shabbos? Not so clear that you could do that, because they were worried that you might not try to take the candle and kind of tilt it a certain way to get a little better lighting. But of course, when you do that, you're readjusting the flame, right? If you especially think about like a wax candle, which they didn't use commonly, but they, wax candle, when you readjust or you put it in a different way, you are burning it faster. Think about the Havdalah candle; it's always dripping if you hold it to the side. So your point is well taken. Again, that's how law works, I guess, right? The laws are made, and
It's time to revisit certain things for the modern day. No, seriously.
I hear.
Doesn't make
I hear.
sense.
I hear. That's a fair point. It's a fair point. I don't disagree that especially the electric the switches. It's a really
You
good point.
have your work cut out for you.
Yeah, we'll
One
see.
day
We'll
when you
see.
become
We'll
to the
see.
Gaon
Yeah.
Category, this is what you're gonna do.
Exactly. Okay, so back in the Shulchan Aruch, v'asir lahashhoso aleha ela im kein goraf, and it's not allowed. You're not allowed to put it on there Friday afternoon into Friday night, unless you did one of the following. Right, and this here now we can say here we're allowed to do it. Right, so there was a fear, but there are ways that the rabbi said, look, we're okay if you do the following. So one of them is garaf. You don't have to do both, by grufa uktuma. It doesn't have to be both. It's either or. You could do one or the other. It was not both. So elaim kein garaf tahainu shehotzu mimenu kol hagechalim. And this is a matter of debate. Here the Shulchan Aruch says you have to take out all the coals. Now this doesn't make. No, sorry. I should show more respect. This is problematic in terms of chazara, which was not our topic yet. But when it comes to Shabbos morning, if you've taken all the coals out before Shabbos, I assure you the oven will be 0 degrees when it comes to Shabbos morning. It won't work, right? So how could it? Because one of the conditions also for chazara is going to be grufa uktuma. So if you are garaf, garaf means you're going to remove all the coals out of the bottom oven. You literally take a broom or whatever, in every fireplace they have one of those broom things. You take the broom and you sweep all the coals out, right? You remove basically the heat source. Right, so you remove the heat source. If you're removing the heat source, so Friday night, okay, maybe there's residual heat that's happening, that's there. But once you get to Shabbos morning, forget it. There's nothing to talk about. So here the Baal HaMor already disagrees with this interpretation. It's not obviously the one the Shulchan Aruch cites, but the Baal HaMor said, no, you're taking that broom and you're sweeping the coals to the side. It is more a way to prevent you from stoking the coals. When you stick the thing in there, you're like, wait, where are the coals? Oh, right, I push them to the side. It's still in the oven. It's giving heat. It's in the kira, but it's giving heat. But it is now pushed to the side in a way that it will remind me that it is Shabbos and I should not do what I was about to do. Okay, so that is so that's why it's not cited here. But to me, that is the one that makes a little more sense because if this is something that could happen on Shabbos morning, you still have to have a heat source in the oven. Okay, so now I gave you the two definitions of gerufa. Let's just read Yud Gimel, just to get that out of the way. Yud Gimel in the Mishnah Berurah, he says, chutz lakir, you take all the coals outside the kira, mutter bazeh. Okay, now it's obviously mutter. Okay? As I said, yasher koach, that's not even a heat source. Of course it should be mutter. There's nothing to stoke. V'chein bekatam, as we'll see in a moment with ketuma, it's also mutter afilu rak nisbashal ksas, even if it's just a little cooked, right? So if it's even just a little cooked, and it's even according to the first opinion, if you do grufa ketuma, you can leave it in the oven, not a problem. So in a practical manner, if you have food in the oven, our ovens today, from Friday night into Shabbos, and I've seen this, people have a Shabbos mode which will continue to cook into Shabbos, but the dial is off because it's in Shabbos mode, so the buttons are non-functional. That is ke'ilu grufa ketuma. I touch the button, nothing happened, right? So the oven is reminding you it's Shabbos, you can't do this. And then I remember I saw this one time. I've seen this where they set it so it went off. So that was a separate issue about dealing with the heat. Because if you open the oven, the heat, the heat leaves, and then this will rekindle the flame, and the oven will go back on. So that might not even be a problem, by the way, because if you're taking out food, that was a very firm oven, right, where it shut off after like an hour into, so that way when you open it, you're not even readjusting the temperature. But I would argue that even if you readjust the temperature, it should be fine, because if you take all the food out on Friday night, it's a psik reshe. At the very least, it's a psik reshe. The lo nichale. You don't care if it gets hot again because you have no food left in there. It doesn't matter to me. So it's like, yeah, inevitably it's going to happen, but I have no skin in the game. I don't really care anymore. Does it get hot? Does it not get hot? And so it's not nichale. And it's a whole argument whether a psik reshe on a derabana or on a deoraisa is mutter. Seems to be by letter law it should be okay. Right? That if inevitably it's going to happen, but I don't benefit from it. I don't care.
But you're causing it.
Even if you're, because the whole thing is that the Torah prohibited malachas machshavas. It has to be thoughtful malacha, meaning that I'm doing it for a purpose, right? That there's a reason behind it. If it's just like something happened, but like it was I did A, and my focus was A, and B happened as a result, but I couldn't care less about B. But my machshava, my thought process, my focus was on A. Then even though B is usher, it's okay. And A is mutter, right? A is I'm taking the food out of the oven. This is my whole, I want to have dinner. B, the temperature is going to readjust. I don't care, right? Because it doesn't help me in any way. If it helps me also, even though that wasn't my intention, then we also assume that B was part of your intention. Meaning, if B makes you happy, then and is helpful to you, then we assume B is part of your machshava, part of your thought process, even if it's not the top of your mind.
So by that logic, I hate to say this, but you should not be able to leave your air conditioning on Shabbos and open the front door, right?
Yes.
Or keep your heat on in the winter and open your front door.
Yeah, somebody.
That's always
wants to
bothered
talk
me
about
that
it. No.
nobody's given me an answer.
Yeah.
Not that I'm going to keep my heat and air conditioning on, but
The reason
it's the same
the reason
thing.
it's mutter is because all of Klal Yisrael does it. The question is, why is it mutter? Which is that's not how the Aruch HaShulchan works. Yeah? It's like everyone's doing it. Okay, so I have to say it's okay if everyone's doing it. The reason that might be a little bit different when it comes to the heat in your house is because it may come under more of a category of davar she'einu miskabe. There you can say you argue the oven too, by the way.
How many
Not every
times
time.
have you heard somebody say, shut the door quickly because you're letting in the
heat
hot
out.
air?
Yeah. The question is does that on its, does that trigger it, right then and there? It doesn't always, which is a very important thing. If it doesn't always happen,
Okay.
then it falls under a different category of davar she'eino miskabe, which is outright mutter. We paskin by Rabbi Shimon that it's outright mutter. If that wasn't my kavanah and it wasn't for sure going to happen, then not a problem. This is why when you open your refrigerator, how can I open my refrigerator? The motor is going to go on once it gets. The reason is because not every time you open the refrigerator are you causing the motor to go on, right? In the aggregate, of
It's
course.
a Shabbos mode for a lot of refrigerators for that reason. It won't necessarily trigger.
It doesn't trigger right away. At some point, it has to go on though, because the food has to stay cold.
Yeah, but you can't cause it to.
You can't cause it to. That's very from of the door. Yeah, but for for those who don't have that, right?
Yeah.
It's fine because it's not something that's for sure going to happen. So we'll talk more about this when we get to when we talk about like preparing your fire before Shabbos. But there's a big difference, I think, between the oven. The oven is a smaller unit where the heat will leave the house very quickly as well. Once you open the door, that heat can leave quickly. Yeah, so I don't. That's why I'm even arguing by the way that the oven is fine. I think if you let as long as it's not your intention, right, that you want it to be hot. Now, I know that that's still not fully parallel because you do want the house to be warm, whatever temperature you set it at. So we'll have to talk about that when we get, to I think in a few simanim we have a discussion about preparing your heat source, achanat ha'esh. So we'll have to talk about that. We'll have an answer. We'll have a good answer for the heating and the air conditioning. Okay, where are we here? Okay, so we're just talking about ketuma, right? Oh, katam. We're back in the Shulchan Aruch. It's on the fourth line of the page 40 for me. Oh, katam. Dahainu shekisa hagachalim be'efer lamai tchumam. Or, and this makes sense. I don't think this is a machlokas about this one. You're covering the coals that are at the bottom of the oven with ashes in order to reduce the heat. you're not putting them out before Shabbos. You're spreading ashes over it to reduce the heat. Now, the only question that I have on this one, the explanation here, which is why is this? How does this prevent you from stoking the coals? I get if you're going to rake the coals to the side, that's an obvious one. How does this help? So in the Be'er Heitev, he cites that it's a sif katan based in the Be'er Heitev on this page. He writes. Oh no! You know what? Let's just read. You know, it's essentially the same point in the Mishnah. Let's just read your Dalet in the Mishnah. He writes here: "Shekisa hakechalim." You cover the coals. The hainu kol hakechalim. All of them. All right, not just some of them, but all of the coals have to be covered. Ve'ein sarich liktom ad she'ein nikar sham eish klal. You don't need to cover it with ashes until there's no fire there. That's not how far you have to go here. You need to cover it. Rak b'kisui efer kolshu, just a little layer milamala on top, al paneim sagi, right on top of the coals is good enough. That's totally fine. But and even afterwards, there's really still a flame there. It's still a fire, right? A huvara, it's still burning afterwards. Shari, according to the Gemara, that is completely fine. Oda marsham afilu hayu gechalim shel rotem she'enam maharim leki kavot. Now, I am not an expert, but rotem, I had to go back and look this up. Rotem are coals that even when you put them out on the outside, right? They kind of they look like they've kind of fully been consumed on the outside. On the inside, they're still burning hot. And so therefore, the heat continues for a much longer period of time with these types of coals. I remember looking up, what's the word here? Steve, you have the word in English, the word rotem?
Well, rotem is a bush that there's a midrash about it, that it's like a lashon hara, that it doesn't, the flame continues, like below the surface, that never, and it doesn't go out.
Correct. That's exactly how this is described as a bush.
Is it rotem of a deep red in Hebrew?
In modern Hebrew, that sounds correct. I think this is an Aramaic word, at least if you look in the Jasper dictionary, it says a species of broom growing in deserts, right? It is, and he cites the Medrash here. It is told of a broom which men made with fire, and it burnt in 12 months, and therefore his evil tongue compared to the embers of the broom fire. Right? It's basically a fire of broom coal. Although it is extinguished on the surface, it continues to burn within. So this is some desert bush.
Yeah, no, it's still, you go to Israel, you see it.
Maybe this is the burning bush, right? So this is the burning bush. It was this kind of species of broom. Okay, I'm not an expert in this, but bottom line you should know is that it's a kind of coal that on the outside it looks extinguished, but then it could still continue for quite some time burning hot. So even if you're using that, he says here, which don't go out very quickly. That's also fine. The reason for all this is Kevin the gila dato the since I've made like a symbolic gesture to myself. I don't want to use these coals on Shabbos. I threw ashes on them. It's a symbolic gesture. At the end of the day, I can still take a thing and stoke the coal. But because I did something, I made a symbolic gesture really to myself. I'm not using these coals. I don't want these. I don't want to do anything with them. Sagi, that's enough. The rabbis that say that's fine. You know what? You did a little thing to yourself. That shows you're not going to stoke the coals. I made a little reminder to myself, and that's good enough. So Od Isa the Gechalim She'amu also teaches that if you have Gechalim She'amu, that they are dim, the coals that have become dim, they look a little darker now, right? They're not burning quite as much. They're dim coals. That is like ketuma already, right? The coals are already they're burnt on the outside, right? They're essentially they turn into ash on the outside of the coal. He says that's like ketuma, okay, which is a big kula. I think if you're doing if you're having a barbecue, let's say you have a barbecue on from before Shabbos, and the coals are already in that state. That's like ketuma. And in theory, if you left things on from prior to Shabbos into Shabbos, that's how you can have fresh barbecue. Okay, you think about it. It's an interesting method in the summer. Have a barbecue for Friday night dinner. The hatam, the kaven shelo chashash lilabotan shelo yumamu much chamilsa she'enu kaver bechituya. And the reason is why is this okay? I mean, the coals are still on here. The reason is because we're not worried you're going to rekindle the flame, to relight the flame of those coals. Right, so that they don't get further dim, right? We're not worried. Like you already, because it's a symbolic thing. Okay, look, oh yeah, they're covered in ash right now, and muchamilsa. So it sort of shows that I don't care about stoking them, because if I cared about stoking them prior to Shabbos, I would have already started to play around with these coals, because I don't want them to burn out so fast. And clearly, it's apparently, according to this, it says it's a gesture that I really don't care that the coals are going to burn up, which means I'm not going to play with them. And to hear, this is even me'eleha. This is like I didn't do anything. This kind of was ketuma on its own, right? It covered itself in ash, and the fact that I didn't stop that from happening is a symbolic gesture, almost to myself, that I don't care that these coals go out anytime soon. Okay, fine. Let's keep going back up on top now. So again, even according to this, the machmir approach. This is the machmir approach, which, by the way, I'm giving it away. We're not going to paskin like the machmir approach. We're going to paskin like the makil approach. Even the machmir approach, once you do some sort of symbolic gesture, the rabbi said it's fine. You're good. You can continue the cooking process from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos, right? Fresh food, it can be, can be cooked, even if it's not, even if it enters into Shabbos and it's not even just raw, but it's like partially cooked. Okay. He then says here, back in the Shulchan Aruch, v'im nasan b'chaticha chaya mutar kilu haisa kula chaya da'alei deikach masiach da'ato meno. And this is an important kula. If you're making a cholent and it's Erev Shabbos, how can you have it cooking into Shabbos? It's not, even according to this Frumer approach, the Chamachmir approach, a cholent is fine, so long as you throw a piece of meat in there. Right, literally one piece of meat allows the whole thing to be perfectly fine, even though the rest of the contents of the cholent are all vegetables, let's say, and they might actually be done on Friday night, right? They could be ready by 10 o'clock at night. If you put them up at 7 o'clock, they may be ready. So you could have consumed it on Friday, but once there's a piece of meat in there, the whole thing takes on the status of being a raw dish, and therefore the whole thing is mutter. Vafilu ain't a grufa, and even if it's not grufa, he says that where you move it from the coals, you remove the coals from the oven, or as the Baal HaMor likes to say, that you swept it to the side of the oven. Uktuma, which again, it's talking about that covering of the coals with ashes. So, muter lismochla keder besamuch chutzala. This actually was on the picture that Steve sent. You want to put it next to the oven, not on top, not inside, but touching on the side of the oven. So again, it's not going to get quite as hot. It'll get some heat, but again, the heat is essentially contained in the oven. But you want to put it up against this oven, it'll get some heat to it. That is completely fine, even if you don't, do grufa or ketuma, totally fine. Because again, the pot is already on the outside of it. That already in itself is a very odd thing to do. That is not on a Wednesday or a Tuesday, you would never do that. So the fact that there's already a pot on the outside is already this symbolic gesture that this is, right, it's Shabbos. I'm not going to do anything to adjust the coals. If I really wanted to make it hot quickly, I would put it on top. I would do. So if you have a vegetarian cholent, you have to. So on a practical level, Michael, if you're making a vegetarian cholent, what you probably should do, unless it's fully cooked before Shabbos, what you should probably do is cover the dial of the crock pot. Okay, you can put a little piece of tape over, but that you would just, nothing crazy. You don't have to be like anything crazy. Just pull a piece of tape. I've seen people, I think it's totally fine. I saw somebody once when I was rabbinic intern. I was at somebody's house, and they had it just facing the other way. So the dial, which is abnormal, the dial was facing the wall. Usually the dial is facing you. They turned it before Shabbos. They turned it. The dial is facing the other way, which would have been very inconvenient to kind of stick your hand all the way around. And that's already fine, right? Once you've done something like that, where you're making it, you do something of that nature, then that's fine. Because a vegetarian cholent, I think they were vegetarian. When we went there. So, but if you have a meat cholent, you're probably good to go. And we'll see in a moment that even if it's a vegetarian cholent, again, according to the second opinion, even if it's partially cooked, once it's partially cooked, you don't have to worry about any of these grufa or ketuma.
With the cholent itself, or cook it before the cholent and then put it
Whatever state it's in when Shabbos
No,
starts.
I'm just asking. So,
No, it depends what is
the
its
meat-
state.
Is the meat
If you have
raw
meat,
and then put it in, and then.
then that's different. It's not raw then. If it's not raw, then it's a different calculation. We're talking about raw.
Oh,
Raw.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so it's a little, so smicha, again, putting it next to is completely fine. There's not an issue at all with putting it next to it. Let's just read one last Mishnah Berurah and then we'll end there. Okay. Motor lismochla tezvav yesh omim delo sharinan hachakiin hasmicha be'erev Shabbos lahashhosa mishetechsha. It is not allowed here. That's why there are those that say that it's not allowed here unless the smicha happened. You put it next to the oven before Shabbos started. Lahashhosa mishetechsha. Unless you did it before it got dark. But to put it there on Shabbos, doing smicha, afilu b'smicha, barak l'svar shniya hamuska v'sof seif muter. Only according to the second opinion is this really going to be allowed. Afilu b'chazara al piha afonim hamivorim b'sif beis. And you have to meet the conditions of chazar, which we'll talk about in sif beis. There are certain conditions in order to return food to the fire. There are certain conditions that have to be met. Many argue with this. And those people say, nah, you can put things back on Shabbos into this. I used to do this in the Heights. We had the steam heat, and it got so hot sometimes. It was like I put it on top of the steam whatever is coming up. It was and we had a cover on it too because you didn't want to touch it because it would burn your finger. So but the wood got a little hot on top of it. So okay, so if you want to get a little heat, okay. And so I feel take care. That's okay, even lechatchila, you could be makil on that situation. As long as it's already hot and fully cooked. Again, if the food is not cooked, then you have to deal with the bishul question, as he says here. Or does it say it here? Actually, says in a different spot where you have to look at shin yud ches if you're not violating the isser of bishul. It says, take a look what the Rama writes towards the end of this siman about this topic. So we'll touch on this a little bit more when we get to Chazara, but there are those who are, when it comes to smicha, to putting something next to the oven, already are saying that's definitely fine. Even on Shabbos, you could put the food there, again, so long as it's cooked, because that in and of itself is already a symbolic gesture that, you're not going to readjust the fire or the flame in any kind of way. Okay, we will pause here. We're going to have to continue next time with one last point from here from the Shulchan Aruch before the Ramah chimes in for a couple of lines. And then we'll have to talk about a tanur and a kofach, the two other kinds of ancient ovens that they had, and the different halachot that were applied in those situations. And only after we do all of that will we finally get to the Yesh Omrim of Tosfos and Rashi, and we'll replay this whole scenario in their world, and we'll talk about all the different iterations that we've talked about here. We'll talk about them in there. So there's a lot ahead of us just within Shehiyah. Probably take us another week, a couple of weeks to really get through it. And then after we finish Shehiyah, Sif Beis talks about Chazara, and we'll talk all about how to do Chazara properly. We'll talk about Kedera Blechs, Kedera Kabi Kedera, and how to make sure that you're heating your food up on Shabbos properly. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And to those of you who watched on YouTube, take care.